At my wedding, I watched my future mother-in-law tilt her champagne glass and smile as if she'd just been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. 100 guests had fallen silent around her, the string quartet still playing something elegant and useless in the background. My mother, Camilla, stood beside the dessert table in a soft sand-colored dress she had sewn by hand, the hem still smelling faintly of fabric chalk. She looked so small in that room, so careful, so out of place, and I hated that she could feel eyes crawling over her. Then Beatrix Lorne leaned toward a cluster of women, not whispering, not hiding, just letting her voice glide through the air like a blade. "That's not a mother," she said. "That's a mistake in a dress." Laughter rippled around her, bright and cruel. Someone covered their mouth, someone else lifted a phone, and my fiancé, Grayson, laughed too. Just a soft laugh, a reflex maybe, but enough to split something open inside me. I didn't laugh. I didn't move. My fingers curled around the edge of the table as if I needed to hold myself upright. And then, without thinking, without planning, I stood. Chairs scraped. Glasses rattled. A hush swept through the hall so quickly it felt like the whole room inhaled at once. "This wedding is over," I said. 100 people stared at me as if they were watching a chandelier fall in slow motion. And that was the moment everything began. Not the humiliation, but the collapse waiting behind it. The hall at Lorne Bay Estate looked like it had been built for royalty, not for real people. The ceilings were so high they swallowed sound. The white columns were polished enough to catch reflections of passing guests, and the chandeliers flickered like stars suspended in crystal cages. It was the kind of room where you were supposed to feel lucky just being invited. I felt trapped the second I walked in. I sat at the head table dressed in a gown that cost more than a month of rent for most people I knew. And yet all I could think about was my mother sitting a few chairs away, smoothing the folds of her dress with shy fingers. Camilla had altered that dress herself the night before, straightened the seams, trimmed the waist, added tiny pearl buttons down the back. It wasn't a designer piece, but she made it look like one. That's what she'd always done. Taken what little she had and made it beautiful. Fallon Lorne, Grayson's younger sister, sashayed past wearing a gown that glittered under every light. She threw my mother a look, one of those lazy glances that took inventory and categorized her in a single second. She leaned toward her friend and whispered something. The girl giggled. I didn't catch the words then, but I would later. "She looks like she wandered in from a thrift shop." My mother kept adjusting her napkin, every movement small, contained. She had spent her whole life learning to shrink in rooms like this, to avoid giving people a reason to notice or judge her. Every time she smiled at me, it was the kind of smile that said she was fine, even if she wasn't. Grayson sat beside me looking perfectly at home, polished, calm, every hair in place. He kept touching my wrist lightly as guests came to compliment him on the venue, the decor, the Lorne family legacy. No one asked about my family. No one asked how Camilla felt or whether she needed anything. They talked over her, around her, past her. The photographer drifted by with his camera, snapping pictures of centerpieces and champagne towers as if documenting a museum exhibit. I watched him avoid pointing his lens at my mother. She was not a Lorne. She was not part of the aesthetic they wanted. Then Beatrix appeared, smooth, immaculate, floating more than walking. She placed a manicured hand on my shoulder and said, "Smile, sweetheart. Today is about image as much as love." The words slid down my spine like cold water. She didn't wait for my reaction. She moved on to greet donors and executives, people she actually cared to impress. A few minutes later, I overheard 2 older men at the next table. "That's the mother?" one asked. "Doesn't look like she belongs here." The second man chuckled. "Well, they can't all be Lornes." I tried to swallow the burn rising in my throat. This was my wedding day, and I was already counting down the minutes until it ended. Grayson noticed my silence and nudged me. "Hey," he murmured, "don't look so tense. My family jokes like this all the time." Jokes? I repeated quietly. He shrugged, offering a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just don't take everything so seriously. He said it like I was unreasonable, like the issue wasn't the disrespect but my reaction to it. The quartet shifted into another song. Servers floated through with trays. The smell of roses warmed under the lights. Everything around me looked picture perfect, but something inside me felt off balance, like a building with a cracked foundation. I kept checking on my mother. She picked at her salad, nodding politely whenever someone spoke near her, even if they weren't speaking to her. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were dim. And that scared me more than anything, because my mother didn't dim, not for anyone. Then came the moment that tipped everything. Beatrix stood near the champagne tower chatting with a group of guests. Her voice was light, almost musical. Grayson had stepped away to greet someone from his father's firm. I was making my way back to the table when I heard her say it, loud enough to be heard but soft enough to pretend she wasn't being cruel. "The bride looks stunning," she said. "Exactly the kind of elegance we showcase." She paused, delicately poised her champagne flute, and added, "But the groom's mother? When she walked in, I thought she was someone's +1. Truly, that's not a mother. That's a mistaken address." The laughter that followed wasn't the loud, raucous kind. It was sharp, bright, the kind that cuts because it pretends not to. My breath froze in my lungs. Caitlin, the cousin who was always eager to impress Beatrix, giggled behind her hand. Fallon grinned without shame. The guests around them chuckled in approval, drinking in the cruelty as if it were part of the evening entertainment. But the moment that cracked me open, the moment I will never forget, was when Grayson returned just in time to hear it. And laughed. Not a booming laugh, just a little puff of amusement. A small exhale. But enough. More than enough. Enough to tell me exactly where I stood in his world. Enough to show me he would never protect my mother. Never choose us. Never see her as anything but an inconvenience. My hands went cold. My vision tunneled. The string quartet kept playing but faded to a distant hum. It felt like the room had stretched itself into a long, narrow corridor, and I was standing alone at the end of it. My mother brushed past me, touching my arm gently. "It's okay, mija," she whispered. "Just one night. Let's get through it." One night of swallowing insults, one night of pretending their cruelty was culture, their condescension was charm. One night too many. I pushed my chair back. The scrape echoed across the marble like a warning bell. People turned, cameras lifted. The quartet faltered and fell silent. A server froze mid-step, balancing a tray of champagne. I walked toward the microphone. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't have one. My voice simply came out, steady and calm and colder than ice. "Thank you all for coming," I said. A soft wave of uneasy laughter fluttered through the room. "This wedding is over." Gasps. A glass shattered somewhere near the back. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" Someone else hissed, "This is going to be a PR disaster." Grayson stood rooted, his face pale. "Nora, don't do this," he whispered. But I wasn't doing anything. I was undoing. I returned to my mother and held out my hand. "We're leaving." She shook her head, tears brimming. "No, baby, don't do this because of me. I'm doing this for us." I walked her out of that hall filled with gold and cruelty, through those towering doors that suddenly seemed less impressive and more like prison gates. The night air hit us like a baptism, cold, honest, real. And as we reached the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A single new email. Subject, "Everything is ready for tomorrow." I didn't know it then, but that message wasn't about heartbreak. It was about war. The diner lights buzzed the way they always did at 3 a.m, thin and tired and more honest than anything we'd seen inside Lorne Bay Estate. My mother sat across from me in our usual booth, the one with the rip in the vinyl patched with duct tape, as if nothing extraordinary had happened just hours earlier. She fixed a napkin on her lap, hands trembling only when she thought I wasn't looking. Outside, the parking lot was wet from a light rain, and every time a car passed, reflections rippled across the window like ghosts drifting by. I wrapped my fingers around the mug of coffee, letting the heat anchor me. The adrenaline from the wedding had drained out of my body, leaving a hollow ache right under my ribs. My dress hung loosely off my shoulders, wrinkled and smelling faintly of roses and humiliation. Hours ago, 100 people had watched me walk away from a perfect fairy tale. Now I was in a 24-hour diner where the air smelled like burnt sugar and old fry oil, and for the first time that night, I could breathe. My mother stirred her tea twice, then set the spoon down carefully. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I did," I said, the words coming out heavier than I intended. "You ended your whole future over one sentence." "No," I answered quietly. "I ended a lie." Her eyes flickered away, toward the row of laminated menus standing upright behind the napkin holder. She wasn't crying, she was too disciplined for that, but the shine in her eyes said enough. She'd spent so much of her life trying not to take up space, not to inconvenience anyone, not to cause trouble. Tonight, I'd dragged her into the center of a storm she never wanted. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine, the same hand that had sewn my dresses, braided my hair before school, stitched my clothes late at night when money was tight. My mother's hands were small but strong, hardened by decades of work. They deserved respect. They deserved gentleness. They deserved to be honored, not mocked in front of strangers. A server appeared to refill our mugs, giving us a brief sympathetic glance before walking away. She recognized me. Everyone in this part of Tampa had seen at least some version of the wedding clip. News travels fast, even before news becomes news. My phone buzzed on the table. I ignored it. The world could wait. But when it buzzed again, once, then twice more, I finally glanced at the screen. 3 messages from an unknown number. One email notification at the top. "Document package uploaded. Please review before morning." I didn't open anything, not yet. The mere sight of it was enough to remind me that what happened at the wedding wasn't the beginning. It was the breaking point of a story that had been building for months, maybe years. Grayson had told me once over wine and candlelight that his family admired my work with Urban Pulse. He said they loved my story. The grit, the underdog rise, the inspirational arc. What he didn't say was that they loved it for reasons that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with how I could be used. I took a breath, staring at the steam rising from my coffee. "Mom," I said softly, "I need to tell you something." She looked up with those gentle eyes of hers. "Mija, not tonight. You're exhausted." "I know, but this isn't going away. Please, let's just sit for a moment." So we sat. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was tight, full of things we weren't ready to say. I remembered being 12 years old, sitting in this same booth, sharing a slice of pie we couldn't afford. Back then, everything felt temporary. Now everything felt fragile. Finally, she whispered, "You scared me tonight." "I scared myself. You walked away from the wedding of a wealthy family. They won't forget that." She paused. "They won't forgive it." I looked at her, and for the first time since the ballroom, I felt that cold fire pull through my chest again. "I'm not afraid of their money." "You should be," she said. "Powerful people don't like being embarrassed. And I don't like watching my mother be humiliated." She pressed her lips together tightly, her tell, the same one she had at the wedding. She never wanted me to fight battles on her behalf. Not because she didn't think I should fight, but because she'd spent a lifetime learning that the world didn't care about women like her, that it was safer to bow your head, apologize, move on, survive. But I wasn't built to survive quietly. Not anymore. The door chimed, and 2 men in business attire walked in, talking loudly about development projects. Their words drifted over. Land value, rezoning requests, incentives. Exactly the kind of language I'd been surrounded by for 2 years while working with Lorne Urban Consortium. Exactly the kind of language Grayson spoke fluently. And there it was again. That sinking realization I had tried to ignore ever since I opened my first collaboration folder with Lorne Group. They never cared about our partnership. They cared about the story behind it. One of the men laughed at something, and my mother stiffened instinctively. Her eyes dropped to her cup, shoulders curling in. I hated that reaction. I hated that she'd been trained by life to shrink like that. "Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Look at me." She raised her eyes. "Nothing they said tonight was true, not one word. You're not a mistake. You're the reason I'm here at all." Her face softened with something like grief, or pride, or both. Mija. Before she could finish, my phone lit up again, this time with a voicemail, then another, then a text. "Call me. Now." Elliot Crane. Elliot Crane, investigative journalist. The man who'd been digging into Lorne Group's urban renewal contracts for years. The man who'd looked at me strangely during a conference last spring, as though he saw something I didn't. I swallowed hard. The last message read, "You're not safe if you stay quiet. And you're not safe if you speak halfway. Call me." I didn't call him. Not yet. Instead, I set the phone down, turned back to my mother, and tried to make sense of the path ahead. But the truth was, the path had already begun unraveling long before tonight. Months ago, when Lorne Group released the Lorne Community Grid app, a polished public tool that looked eerily similar to an internal prototype I'd spent a year designing. When Grayson told me it wasn't the right time to credit Urban Pulse, when Fallon accidentally leaked the narrative that I was a symbolic partner, not a real stakeholder, when I first saw the words humanization asset next to my name in a leaked planning document, I thought it would get better. I thought once I married Grayson, I'd have an actual seat at the table. How naive. The server returned with a fresh pot of coffee. "Rough night?" she asked gently. I smiled without answering. The question didn't need one. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out a tiny sewing kit, the same one she'd carried for 20 years. She began stitching a loose thread on the sleeve of her dress, hands steady now. The sight of that small act, so familiar, so grounded, pulled something inside me taut. I watched her for a long moment before finally reaching for my phone. "I need to step outside," I said. She looked worried but nodded. Outside, the air was cool and damp, the asphalt shimmering under the street lamps. The SUV from earlier, the one that had been parked across the street since we arrived, was still there. Engine off, windows dark. A shiver ran up my spine. I hit call. Elliot answered on the first ring. "Good. You didn't wait." "What's going on?" I asked. "You think tonight was just about that comment?" he said. "It wasn't. You humiliated the Lorne family in front of 100 witnesses, and you walked away holding more power than you realize. I don't care about power, but they think you do, and they're going to react fast. Before the day ends tomorrow, they'll shift the narrative. They'll bury anything that threatens them." I leaned against the side of the diner, gripping the phone tighter. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause. Then he said very quietly, "You should check your email. Someone sent you the first piece." "The first piece of what?" "Proof," he said. "Proof of what the Lornes have been hiding. Proof of what they did to your company, and maybe what they did to your mother." My breath caught. "My mother?" "You need to read it," he said, voice firm. "And Nora, don't open it inside, you're being watched." I glanced at the SUV again. My heartbeat thumped against my ribs. Inside the diner, my mother lifted her eyes toward me through the window. She gave me a small, tired smile, unaware of the storm moving toward us. I swallowed hard. "Elliot," I whispered, "what am I about to see?" "The truth," he said. "And once you see it, there's no going back." The line went dead. I stood there in the cool Tampa night, staring at the email preview glowing on my screen. And for the first time all evening, I understood something with absolute clarity. Walking away from that wedding wasn't the final blow. It was the first one. The email sat at the top of my screen like a ticking bomb. I stood outside the diner beneath the humming street lamp, pulse loud in my ears, breath fogging in the cool Tampa air. The subject line was simple, almost polite. Initial documents attached. Review ASAP. Nothing alarming on the surface, nothing dramatic. But the second I tapped it open, the world tilted. The first page was a scan of a contractor ledger under Lorne Urban Consortium's Lincoln Renewal Project. I expected numbers, maybe some inflated budgets, maybe a few ghost vendors. The usual breadcrumbs Elliot had hinted at months ago. I did not expect to see the address of a condemned property in East Paloma, my grandmother's old house. I stared at the document, throat tight. The last time I had set foot on that cracked porch, I was 12, clutching a backpack while my mother negotiated with a landlord who had decided he didn't rent to single mothers anymore. That house had been the final exit point before our lives collapsed into the small apartment above the auto shop. It was the beginning of everything hard and everything we had survived. Now the same address sat on a spreadsheet of properties, acquired through accelerated displacement measures. A sterile phrase for something violent. Below the address was a signature. Approved by M. Lorne. Martin Lorne, Grayson's father. My fingers went cold. The next page revealed payment transfers to an entity called Sunlight Integrated Services, a contractor supposedly hired to conduct relocation assistance. But the amount they charged, nearly 5 times the normal cost, had no receipts, no logs, no documentation. The final line was highlighted. Services performed. Familial eviction review. I stared at the words. I read them twice, then a third time. Familial eviction. My chest tightened, breath shrinking in my lungs. I tried to make sense of it, piece it together. Why would Lorne Group be involved in something that far back? Why would they have records tied to the house where my grandmother died, the house where we'd lived until a landlord forced us out? Unless they weren't just another landlord. Unless the hand pushing us out of that home had always been theirs. A memory unspooled suddenly, my mother crying quietly in the kitchen, thinking I was asleep, whispering to herself, "They said they'd make sure we couldn't come back. They said we were a liability." Back then, I thought she meant the landlord. But what if she hadn't meant him? I swallowed hard, fighting the rising panic. I needed air. I took 2 steps away from the diner door before it swung open. My mother stepped out, her eyes widening when she saw my face. "Nora, you're pale. What happened?" I couldn't tell her. Not yet. The truth felt too big, too sharp. It would cut her before I had a way to protect her from it. "Just work stuff," I lied weakly. She wasn't convinced. Of course she wasn't. My mother could read my soul from across a room, but she didn't push. She simply touched my arm and said, "Let's go home." Home. A word that had always been slippery for us. We drove back to her apartment in silence, the kind of silence full of everything we weren't ready to say. When we arrived, she went straight to her room to change. I stayed in the living room on the couch, staring at the document on my phone as if the numbers might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. Then the screen dimmed, and another email popped up, from the same unknown sender. "Next drop tomorrow. Be ready. And don't trust anyone who tells you this isn't what it looks like." I locked my phone and set it face down on the coffee table. My pulse was still racing. I had to think. I had to breathe. I had to separate emotion from fact. But emotion was a fact. Especially when the paperwork was tied to the home where my mother had begged for another week before the landlord threw us out. Especially when the signature belonged to the man who had welcomed me into his mansion years later with a glass of champagne and a speech about philanthropy. The room felt small suddenly. Too small. I stood and walked into the kitchen, leaned against the counter, tried to steady my breathing. This wasn't just about their arrogance at the wedding. This was something older, something deeper, something woven into the soil of my childhood. Mom walked in wearing her pajamas, a faded t-shirt and cotton pants, and she looked younger like that, softer, almost like the mom I remembered before everything went hard. She paused when she saw me gripping the counter. "Baby," she whispered, "tell me." I closed my eyes. "Do you remember the house on Gable Street?" Her lips parted, and I saw the past flicker across her face. A mixture of grief, shame, and something that looked like fear. "Yes," she murmured. "Do you remember how we lost it?" Her gaze dropped. "Nora, I need to know, Mom. Was there more to it? Did someone force us out?" She hesitated for a long time. Too long. My stomach dropped. "Mom?" She sank into a chair, hands clasped. "I didn't want you to ever carry that weight," she said softly. "You were so young. Tell me." She exhaled slowly. "The landlord wasn't the only one behind it." I felt the world tighten around me. "There were investors," she whispered. "Developers who wanted the block cleared. They said we didn't fit the image they wanted. And when I asked for time, one of their representatives told me, 'Those who can't keep up with progress get replaced.'" My heart hammered so loudly I barely heard her next words. "I didn't know who they were," she continued. "I never saw names. Just a company letterhead. Something with a sun on it." My knees weakened. Sunlight Integrated Services. The name on the ledger. I gripped the back of the chair to steady myself. "Mom, the Lorne Group owned that development." She froze, eyes widening in horror. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be. Grayson's family? They're important, influential. But that was years before—" "Before I met him," I finished hollowly. "Before Urban Pulse. Before everything." She covered her mouth with trembling fingers. "Misha." I sat across from her, staring at the woman who had survived eviction, poverty, job loss, and 1,000 small humiliations, never knowing that the people behind one of her biggest losses were the same people who smiled at me over champagne years later. "I need to tell you something else," I said quietly. "Something I did before tonight." Her expression turned cautious. "What is it?" I hesitated. My heart thudded. But she deserved the truth, at least part of it. "For months," I said slowly, "I've been buying shares of Lorne Urban Consortium. Through shell companies." Quietly. Her eyes widened. "Why would you do that?" "Because they were using my work, because they were erasing me, because I needed leverage." She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Not as her daughter, but as someone carrying a storm. "How much do you own?" she whispered. I swallowed. "Almost half." She let out a shaky breath. "Nora, this isn't small. This could get dangerous." "I know." "You're fighting an empire." "No," I said, leaning forward. "I'm fighting the people who thought they could rewrite my story. And yours." A tear slipped down her cheek. Not because she was afraid, because she understood. And because she saw exactly what tonight had unleashed inside me. Before either of us could say more, a soft tap came at the window. A single sharp knock. We both turned. The SUV from the diner was parked across the street. Watching. I inhaled sharply, pulse spiking. "Mom, go to your room," I whispered. She didn't argue, not this time. I walked to the window slowly, carefully, my reflection faint against the glass. I couldn't see the driver. The windows were too dark. My phone buzzed again. A text from Elliot. "They know you have the documents. Whatever you do next, don't do it alone." I stared out at the street, at the SUV, at the shadow inside. And then, for the first time since the ballroom, a strange calm settled over me. Because I wasn't the girl from Gable Street anymore. I wasn't the outsider begging for space at someone else's table. I had leverage. I had proof. I had power they never saw coming. And tomorrow, I would walk into Lorne Tower not as a bride, but as the one person capable of destroying their legacy from the inside. The sun hadn't risen yet when I stepped outside, but the sky had already begun its slow shift from black to bruised purple. My mother was asleep in her room, door slightly cracked the way she always left it, an old habit from years when every noise might have meant trouble. I stood in the living room for a long minute, staring at the documents spread across the coffee table. The ledger, the property records, the signatures, the proof that the Lorne Empire had touched my life long before I ever touched theirs. My phone buzzed with another message from Elliot. They'll try to control the story today. Move first. That was enough to push me into motion. I printed out 3 copies of the documents, slid them into a slim folder, then stepped into the cold morning air. The SUV that had been watching us the night before was gone, but the feeling wasn't. I kept scanning every shadow, every parked car, every window. The quiet suburban street felt too still, too expectant. The drive downtown took 20 minutes, but it felt longer. Every red light tightening the coil of anticipation inside my chest. When Lorne Tower came into view, rising above the skyline like a sharpened blade, my stomach clenched. I'd walked through those glass doors dozens of times before, always with a curated invitation, always welcomed with a polished smile. This morning, I wasn't sure what I'd find waiting for me. I parked in a public lot 2 blocks away. No security cameras, no license plate scanners. I'd learned enough from Elliot to know better than arriving through the underground garage. Each step toward the tower felt like walking deeper into enemy territory. When I entered the lobby, the receptionist, a young man with perfect hair and nerves showing in his jawline, looked up sharply. "Oh," he breathed, almost in relief. "Ms. Velasquez, they asked me to let them know the moment you arrived." His voice trembled. "Everyone's been looking for you." Of course they had. The wedding wasn't even 12 hours old. The clip had already been trending online. The Lorne PR team had probably been awake all night crafting an explanation, a spin, a lie. I leaned in and lowered my voice. "Would you mind not announcing me just yet?" He blinked. They said it was urgent, and I'm saying it's personal." He hesitated only a second before nodding. "Elevators are open." I stepped inside the mirrored elevator and watched my reflection warp slightly in the curved glass. My hair was pulled back in a tight low ponytail, my black suit clean and fitted, the folder under my arm held like a weapon. I looked nothing like a runaway bride, and nothing like the girl from Gable Street. On the 26th floor, the elevator dinged softly. The hallway was empty, lined with modern paintings and recessed lighting. I walked straight to the conference room, the same room where, months ago, I'd been introduced as the community partner, while my work was siphoned, polished, and repackaged. The door was cracked open. Inside, voices were already raised. "An embarrassment!" "The footage is everywhere, Martin. We cannot let her speak to the press. Find out what she took. I want everything." I stepped inside, and the room snapped into silence. Beatrix Lorne stood near the head of the table, her face pale under flawless makeup. Martin was red, furious, pacing like a caged bull. Fallon sat with her arms crossed, glaring. Grayson, dressed in the same suit he'd worn to the rehearsal dinner, looked like he hadn't slept at all. He took a step forward. "Nora," I raised a hand. Just don't." His mouth closed. Beatrix recovered first. "Nora, darling," she began, voice trembling with false warmth. "We know last night was emotional, and the press can twist things. But if we present a unified statement, I'm not here to repair your image," I said, setting the folder on the table. "I'm here for answers." Martin scoffed. "You have no right to demand anything." "I have 48% of the voting shares," I replied calmly. "So yes, I do." Fallon's eyes flew open. "That's impossible." "Is it?" I opened the folder and slid the documents out one by one. 3 shell companies, all legal, all approved transactions, all traced back to me. Grayson's face drained of color. "Nora, when you were busy taking credit for my designs," I said. Beatrix's mouth opened and closed like she was struggling to breathe. "You bought into us? Without telling anyone?" I met her gaze. "You didn't give me a seat at the table, so I built my own." Martin slammed a palm onto the table. You won't get away with this. I already have. I pushed the first document toward him. But that's not why I'm here. He glanced down, eyes narrowing. What is this? Property acquisition logs, I said. From the Lincoln Renewal Project. Fallon leaned in. So what? That's public. Check the address. They looked closer. Then Martin's face twisted. Beatrix staggered back a step. Fallon blinked as if trying to make the words rearrange themselves. Grayson whispered, Gable Street. Isn't that? My grandmother's house, I said. The house my mother grew up in. The house we were evicted from. The house you bulldozed for a project you never completed. The silence that followed was suffocating. Beatrix lifted a hand to her chest. Nora, we had no idea. I cut her off. Your signature says otherwise. Martin jabbed a finger at the document. I sign dozens of things every week. I don't look at every... That's the problem, I snapped. You destroy lives and call it paperwork. Grayson stepped forward, voice shaky. Nora, please, you have to believe me. I didn't know. If I had... You laughed, I said. Last night. When your mother insulted mine. So, no... You don't get to say you didn't know what cruelty looks like. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Beatrix's voice thinned. Even if mistakes were made, and I'm not admitting they were, what exactly do you plan to do with this? Blackmail us? I met her stare without blinking. No, I'm going to rebuild what you tore down, with or without you. Martin barked a laugh. You? A girl with a software platform and a sob story? You think you can replace us? I reached into the folder again and dropped the final set of papers onto the table. Elliot Crane is releasing an exposé tonight, I said, on corrupt renewal contracts, ghost vendors, inflated invoices, eviction through intimidation. Fallon's breath hitched. You wouldn't. It's already in motion. Beatrix whispered. We can make this go away. I don't want it to go away, I said. I want accountability. Grayson's voice cracked. Nora, please, this will ruin everything. It should, I replied. Some things deserve to be ruined. The room descended into chaos. Shouting, accusations, panic. Fallon demanded her lawyer. Martin ranted about defamation. Beatrix trembled with fury and fear. Grayson whispered my name like a plea. But I was done being their story. Done being their symbol. Done being their asset. I turned to leave, but Grayson grabbed my arm. Not hard, but desperate. Nora, he said, voice breaking. I love you. That wasn't a lie. I loosened his grip from my sleeve. Love doesn't look like silence, I said softly. And you were silent when it mattered. His hand fell away. I walked to the door. But before I stepped out, I glanced over my shoulder. One more thing, I said. Starting today, all decisions involving community development projects will require my approval, effective immediately. Fallon shrieked, You can't do that. I can, I said, and I will. Beatrix's face twisted, fury overtaking her mask. This is revenge. No, I replied. Revenge would be destroying you the way you destroyed everyone beneath you. I opened the door. This is justice. I stepped into the hallway and closed the conference room behind me, silence falling like a final verdict. The receptionist stared as I passed. Is everything okay? I paused just long enough to answer. No, but it will be. Outside the glass tower, the sun had risen fully now. Red, sharp, unforgiving. Cars moved along the busy street, people rushing to jobs they'd probably never get credit for. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new message from Elliot. Phase 2 begins today. You ready? I looked up at the skyscraper behind me. The tower built on stolen land, stolen lives, stolen stories. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt steady. Ready. Yes, I whispered. Then I walked toward the next battle, folder under my arm, the weight of truth finally shifting from burden to weapon. I didn't go home after leaving Lorne Tower. I couldn't. My mind was too loud, my pulse too sharp, my body too keyed up to sit still on a couch while the world I'd just detonated began shifting into a different shape. Instead, I drove straight to the only place I knew would feel solid under my feet, the old Urban Pulse workspace in East Harbor, a renovated warehouse that still smelled faintly of sawdust and code. When I stepped inside, the lights were dim except for the row of desk lamps left on by the night shift interns. The hum of servers filled the space like a heartbeat. It was the sound of something alive, something honest, something I built. My partner and co-founder Daniel Mora looked up from a cluster of monitors, his dark hair tied back, his expression somewhere between confusion and alarm. "Nora, it's barely 7 a.m. What happened?" He took one look at my face and stood. "Oh God, it's worse than I thought." I dropped the folder onto the main table. "The worst part is that it's exactly what we thought." He opened the documents without another word. I watched his expression shift from curiosity to grim understanding. "This is Lorne's internal ledger," he murmured. "And this address, Nora, this is my grandmother's house," I said. He sat back slowly, eyes scanning the highlighted lines. "They evicted your family. Under the same development umbrella they later used to court you as the community face of their brand?" "Looks like it." "And Grayson never told you?" "No," I said. "He didn't know, and honestly, I don't care anymore." Daniel dropped the pages onto the table. "This is corporate cannibalism disguised as philanthropy." Then he exhaled heavily. "So what's the next move?" For the first time that morning, I felt the swirl of exhaustion pull at my ribs. "I need you to help me prepare for what comes next. Elliot's timing his exposé for tonight. Lorne Group will try to bury it or twist it before it hits the surface. They'll paint me as unstable, emotional, jilted bride, angry minority girl from a broken home, anything to take eyes off the truth." Daniel nodded, jaw tightening. "Then we get ahead of them." I sat at my desk and powered up my workstation. The screen flooded with notifications, messages from reporters, colleagues, city officials, acquaintances suddenly pretending to care, and people I barely knew offering sympathy or requests for interviews. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened the encrypted folder Elliot had sent hours earlier, a secondary set of files labeled Phase 2. Inside were more contractor records, internal emails, payment approvals, and something that made my stomach drop. A photograph of a group of men in suits standing near a chain-link fence at Gable Street, smiling with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from acquisition. One of the men was Martin Lorne. Another was wearing a Sunlight Integrated Services badge, and standing just behind them was a younger Grayson. Daniel leaned over my shoulder. "Is that?" "Yes," I said. "Do you think he remembers being there?" "I don't know." My fingers clenched on the edge of the desk. But memory or not, the fact is he stood on the land where my family was being forced out. Then the truth needs to be told. A long breath left my lungs. It will be. Daniel and I worked for the next 2 hours refining a statement, preparing a press packet, and strengthening the presentation I'd planned to deliver to the city's oversight committee later in the week. I was meticulous, not out of fear, but out of necessity. When powerful people are cornered, they don't fight fair. Daniel made coffee while I reviewed the files again. "You know they're going to try to spin it," he said, placing a mug beside me. "They'll say the acquisition was legal, that evictions were routine, that you're taking it personally because of the wedding." I nodded. "That's why the numbers matter, the missing invoices, the inflated payments, the ghost vendors. It's bigger than my family. It's everyone they've displaced." "And you're about to become the face of that story." I looked at him. "I don't want to be the face." "I know," he said, "but you're the only one who can." We kept working until my eyes burned and my hands trembled slightly from the caffeine. By 9:45, news alerts began popping up. Breaking. Billionaire Lorne family faces. Scandal after wedding disruption. Bride walks out. Urban Pulse founder ends ceremony. After insult toward Mother Insider, claims Lorne Group is in crisis mode. After public wedding collapse. I turned off the notifications. A voice echoed from the far end of the warehouse. So it's true. I looked up. Talia Reyes, our lead designer, stood with her arms crossed, her expression dark. She was wearing a hoodie and leggings, hair pulled into a messy knot, her usual morning mode, except this morning her eyes were sharper, colder. You broke the internet, she said, and you walked into Lorne Tower this morning? Alone? Yes. She whistled softly. Ballsy. Daniel shot her a look. This isn't a game. I know, she said, which is why I'm asking, what's the plan? I hesitated. The plan is to expose them, all the way down. Talia nodded. Then you're going to need help. I blinked. What do you mean? People are already gathering outside the tower, reporters, protesters, former tenants. The story is spreading. You'll be the one they point cameras at, and we both know how quickly public opinion can twist if someone whispers the right lie. She wasn't wrong. We need to own the narrative, Daniel said, echoing her, not react to theirs. The front door slammed open before I could respond. All three of us snapped our heads toward it. Grayson walked in. I felt Talia tense beside me. Daniel moved closer, subtly putting himself between us. Grayson's eyes were bloodshot, his hair unkempt, suit wrinkled. He looked like a man who had been chasing a ghost all night. Nora, he said, voice raw, please, just talk to me. I stood slowly, keeping the desk between us. You shouldn't be here. I know, he said, his breath shaking. But I needed to see you. I needed to explain. Daniel stepped forward. She doesn't owe you anything. Grayson ignored him. His eyes stayed locked on mine. Nora, I didn't know about your family's house. I swear, I had no idea. A muscle in my jaw tightened. That photo says otherwise. What photo? He looked genuinely confused, and for a moment doubt flickered through me, until I remembered what he had done last night, how he'd laughed, how he had let his mother humiliate mine without blinking. Even if you didn't know then, I said softly, you know now. He swallowed hard. I came to say I'm sorry. For last night. For not standing up for you. For everything. Which part? Talia asked sharply. The part where your mother called her mother a mistake? Or the part where you laughed? Grayson looked at the floor. I reacted before I understood what she was saying, before I processed it. You processed it just fine, I said. You chose comfort, optics, them. His head lifted. I chose wrong, and I want to fix it. I stared at him. You can't fix this. Then let me help. Help how? I asked. By telling your family to be nicer? By issuing a statement? By making yourself look better? His face contorted. By telling the truth, about everything. Daniel stiffened. What truth? Grayson hesitated, tortured. Then he said quietly, my father has been hiding losses for years, funneling money into dead projects, paying off inspectors, and he's been preparing to blame it all on your division. Talia stepped forward. Excuse me? You heard me, Grayson said. My father planned to use Urban Pulse as the fall guy when the Lincoln audits began. He said your background made you believable as the scapegoat. I felt my heart turn to ice. He said you'd look emotional, unstable, overambitious. The perfect narrative. The room went silent. Finally, I asked, voice flat, why are you telling me this? Because I love you, he whispered. And because this morning, when I saw the documents in that room, I realized I never really knew what my family was capable of, and I can't let them destroy you. For the first time since I'd met him, Grayson looked small, human, broken. But that didn't change what needed to happen. I walked toward him slowly. His eyes softened with hope, until I stopped 2 feet away. One day, I said gently, you'll understand this wasn't personal. This was necessary. He exhaled shakily. Nora, I don't hate you, I said, but I can't save you from your father, and I can't let you save me from him either. His face crumpled. "Leave," I said softly, "before you're dragged down with them." He backed away slowly, pain carving lines into his face. At the door, he looked at me one last time. "I'll testify," he said. "If you ask me to, I'll tell the city everything." I nodded. "I know." But I didn't ask it of him. He left. Silence lingered long after he was gone. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "So," he said quietly, "that was something." "It changes nothing," I murmured. Talia folded her arms. "Then what's next?" I lifted the folder again, the truth heavy in my hands. "Next," I said, "we finish what they started. And bring down the house they built on other people's bones." The rain started just as I stepped out of the warehouse. Not a storm, just a thin, steady drizzle that blurred the skyline and made the pavement shimmer like oil. I pulled my hood up, folder tucked against my chest, and walked toward the alley where Elliot said he would meet me. The alley ran behind a row of old brick buildings, dumpsters lined up like slumped soldiers, graffiti bright under the flickering street lamp. He was already there. Elliot Crane leaned against his car, one foot propped on the bumper, camera bag slung over his shoulder. He looked exactly the way an investigative journalist should look, rumpled, sharp-eyed, exhausted, and dangerous in the way truth-tellers always were. "You look like you've been awake for 3 days," he said as I approached. "I have?" He smirked faintly. "Good, you'll need that kind of crazy." I handed him the folder. "Everything you sent has been cross-checked. Daniel's helping me build an audit trail." He flipped through the pages, eyebrows lifting. "You walked into the tower this morning, alone. You realize how reckless that was?" "Necessary," I said. "They needed to know I'm not afraid." Elliot snorted. "Fear isn't your problem. Rage is." I didn't deny it. He waved me closer to the trunk of his car, popping it open. Inside were 3 more folders, all marked Federal Review, Draft. I felt my pulse skip. "What is this?" I asked. "Phase 3, he said. "These files need your confirmation. They tie the Lorne Group to early acquisitions in 5 cities, not just Tampa. They show a decade of predatory redevelopment dressed up as urban revival. And," he tapped one folder, "they include something you need to see before tonight." He handed it to me. I opened it, and the world tilted again. Inside was a photograph, grainy telephoto, taken through a car window. My mother, Camilla, walking out of a grocery store carrying 2 bags of produce. Behind her, a man with a camera slung across his chest followed at a distance. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 weeks earlier, before the wedding, before any of this had exploded. "What is this?" I whispered. "A surveillance record," Elliot said. "One of the internal whistleblowers leaked it. The Lorne Group hired a firm to follow you and your mother. They tracked your routines, your meetings, your home." My throat closed. "They were preparing to use anything they could against you," he continued. "Pictures, conversations, locations. They wanted leverage." "Why my mother?" My voice cracked. "Because vulnerable targets break easier," he said, "and because they assumed she was your weakness." I gripped the folder hard enough that the pages bent. "She's not my weakness. She's my anchor." "That's why it didn't work on you," he said quietly. "But it will matter in the hearings. You'll need to brace her for questions." Anger slid through me slowly, a tide rising. "How much do you know?" I asked. "Enough," he said. "Enough to know they were preparing a narrative in case you ever pushed back. Enough to know they feared you more than they respected you. Enough to know they planned to turn Urban Pulse into a fall guy if anything blew up." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. "We expose everything tonight." "We do," Elliot said, "but you need to understand something." I looked at him. "The moment the story goes live, you become a threat they can't control. They might not touch you directly. They're too public for that. But they will try to discredit you, overwhelm you, smear you. And if that fails, they'll weaponize the legal system." "I'm ready." "No," he said softly. You're not, but you're doing it anyway. That's something else entirely. He shut the trunk. Come on, he said. There's someone you need to see. We drove 15 minutes to a quiet residential block on the city's west side. Single-story homes lined the street, some freshly painted, others sagging from neglect. Elliot parked in front of a faded blue house with a metal ramp added to the porch. This is where he lives, he said. Aiden Blake. I blinked. The whistleblower? The one who sent the first documents? Yes. Elliot's expression darkened. He reached out to me last year, said he was scared, said something inside Lorne Group was wrong at its core. I didn't realize how deep it went until he sent your files. He led me up the ramp and knocked twice. The door opened slowly. A young man stood there, maybe 28, with a cast on his left wrist and a thin scar just under his cheekbone. His eyes were sharp, though, bright, intelligent, and exhausted. You must be Nora, he said. I nodded. He stepped aside. Come in. The living room was cluttered with papers, sticky notes, and multiple laptops. A large corkboard covered the wall, pinned with maps, printed emails, contractor lists, and photos of construction sites. You've been tracking them, I murmured. For 3 years, he said, ever since I joined their compliance department. He sat carefully on the couch. I thought I was helping build better communities. Turns out, I was helping cover up what they were doing. So you leaked the files? He nodded. I tried to report internally. They ignored me. Then someone from upper management told me to forget what I'd seen if I wanted a future. That was the day I started pulling everything I could. I hesitated before asking, What happened to your wrist? His expression hardened. Car accident. Someone clipped me on the highway. Driver never found. My stomach twisted. Do you think it was intentional? He shrugged. Let's just say I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Elliot glanced at me knowingly. Aiden continued. I knew something big was coming when they hired that surveillance firm. They started asking for your historical records, your business documents, asset logs, family background. My breath shortened. Why? Because they thought you were expendable, he said. But they also thought you were dangerous. I didn't do anything, I murmured. That's exactly why, he said. Because you weren't controllable. You didn't need them. You weren't grateful the way they expected you to be. Martin hates people he can't buy. I clenched my teeth. Did they know about Gable Street? Not at first, he said. But they dug through old records and realized your mother was one of the families displaced during their early acquisitions, and that terrified them. Why? Because if that became public, he said, you wouldn't just be a disgruntled partner, you'd be the proof of everything they tried to hide. The room filled with a long, heavy silence. Finally, Aiden stood and walked to the corkboard. He pulled down a sheet of paper, folded it, and handed it to me. This one, he said, is what will burn it all down. I unfolded it. It was an internal memo stamped Confidential Priority Review. At the top, Objective. Prepare narrative positioning for potential scandal scenarios involving Urban Pulse Partnership. Underlined below. If necessary, employ personal background details of Velasquez family to redirect public blame toward mismanagement or emotional instability. My hands shook. They had written me into their destruction plan. Months ago, before the wedding, before the insult, before any of it. Aiden's voice softened. You understand now? They never intended for you to rise. They intended for you to fall. I exhaled slowly, my anger no longer hot but cold, precise. Elliot checked his watch. We need to get back. News outlet is publishing at 6. They'll send the first wave of documents to federal investigations by 8, and the city council hearing is at 9. Aiden stepped closer. Nora, he said quietly, you're doing what none of us could, what all of us wanted to. Just don't stop now. I nodded. We left the house as the drizzle turned into steady rain. Elliot drove. I watched water streak the windshield, blurred streetlights sliding across my view. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I murmured, "but I know what I'm doing." As the tower complex came into view, cold, silver, gleaming like a blade, I felt the fear, the grief, the exhaustion simmer beneath my ribs. But beneath it all was something harder. Purpose. I tightened my grip on the folder and whispered to myself, they built an empire on lies. Tonight, it starts to fall. The rain had stopped by the time we reached the downtown district, but the streets were still shiny, the pavement reflecting skyscrapers like dark mirrors. Lorne Tower stood at the center of it all, glass, steel, and money arranged in the shape of power. Normally, the plaza in front of it was quiet in the late afternoon. Not today. People were gathered in clusters, reporters with cameras, former tenants holding cardboard signs, lawyers in tailored coats, city staff with clipboards, and scattered among them, employees of the Lorne Group whispering urgently into phones. The air felt tight, electric, as if the city itself understood something was cracking open. Elliot parked on a side street. "You sure you want to walk through the front?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "They need to see me." I stepped out of the car, folder in hand, hood pulled low against the damp air. Conversations hushed as I crossed the plaza. Eyebrows lifted, fingers pointed, cameras turned. Then a reporter called out, "Nora, is it true the Lorne Group used surveillance firms to follow your mother?" Another shouted, "Is Urban Pulse cutting ties with Lorne Group?" Then, "Were you aware your family home was part of a disputed displacement?" Every question hit like a flash of light. But I didn't stop. I didn't answer. Not yet. At the entrance, security guards stood tense, shoulders stiff. When I reached them, they exchanged uncertain glances. No one blocked me. They stepped aside. Power shifts quickly when someone stops pretending they don't have any. Inside, the lobby buzzed with panic, executives whispering, assistants rushing between elevators, phones ringing non-stop. The large digital screens around the walls usually displayed investor news and project updates. Now they all showed one thing: Live Countdown, Crane Expose, Lorne Urban Consortium under investigation. A timer ticked down from 31 minutes. Someone gasped, another cursed, papers rustled like wings of frightened birds. I took the elevator to the 28th floor, the floor reserved for high-level strategic meetings. The elevator doors slid open, and the room went silent as heads turned toward me. Beatrix Lorne was there, her posture rigid, her pearls perfectly placed, her eyes sharp as razors. Martin stood beside her, red-faced, phone pressed to his ear. Fallon was pacing, hair disheveled, all her usual composure gone. Several board members sat stiffly around the long conference table, each one wearing a different variation of dread. When they saw me, every conversation stopped. Martin slammed his phone down. "You." His voice was pure venom. I stepped into the room calmly. "Me." Fallon hissed, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Walking into a meeting I now have the right to attend." Beatrix gave a thin, brittle smile. "You've made your point. You humiliated us at the wedding. You stirred up the press, but this—" She gestured at the countdown screens visible through the glass walls. "This is career suicide." "For whom?" I asked. Martin jabbed a finger toward the hallway. "Get her out." No one moved. He repeated louder, "I said, get her out." The board members exchanged uneasy glances. A few looked at me, then at him, unsure whom they were supposed to obey. Power is a strange thing, thin, fragile, often held together only by perception. Beatrix's voice softened into a false plea. "Nora, sweetheart, you're upset. We understand. But you're letting anger ruin your future. If you retract your claims, if you step away from this childish crusade, we can fix everything. We'll issue a joint statement. Say you were overwhelmed, emotional." There it was, the narrative they had rehearsed, the one written in that internal memo. Emotional instability, overreaction, woman from a modest background who wasn't used to the pressures of power. I set the folder on the table. No. Martin banged his fist again. You think you can destroy us? You destroyed yourselves, I said quietly. I'm just turning on the lights. Beatrix's expression cracked. You don't understand the scope of what you're unleashing. I understand it perfectly. I tapped the folder. Do you want to see the eviction record? Or the surveillance logs? Or the memo where you planned to use my mother's background against me? Fallon's face blanched. You saw that? I saw everything. Beatrix's mask slipped for the first time. You were never supposed to see those. I held her gaze. But I did. A board member cleared his throat nervously. Mrs. Lorne, if these documents are real, we could be facing— They're fake, Martin snapped. All of them. Doctored. She's manipulating you all. I slid a single page toward him. Then why is your signature on them? He froze. Silence washed through the room like cold air. Fallon sank into a chair. Dad, tell me this isn't real. Martin swallowed, jaw clenched. It's business. It's how redevelopment works. People get displaced, money moves, obstacles get cleared. That's the world. No, I said. That's your world. You built a kingdom on other people's broken foundations, and now it's collapsing. The screens outside the conference room beeped loudly. The countdown hit 0, then flashed red. Breaking, Federal Review initiated. Lorne Group under investigation for fraud and unlawful displacement. Gasps erupted around the table. Phones dinged with alerts. Some board members scrambled to make calls. Others just stared, pale and frozen, as if the building might crumble beneath us. Martin turned on me with fury. You did this. You did this, I repeated, long before I ever walked into your life. Beatrix stepped closer, eyes glassy but still sharp. You think this makes you a hero? You think the world cares about your righteous anger? They don't. They will rip you apart. They will dig into your past. They will question your competence, your integrity. They will smear your mother. You're not a threat. You're a distraction. I leaned in slightly. So were we. Until today. For the first time since I'd known her, Beatrix flinched. Martin grabbed his briefcase. This meeting is over. No, I said. It's not. I pulled a final document from the folder and slid it to the center of the table. A notarized affidavit from Aidan Blake. This is from a member of your own compliance department, I said. He details your shell companies, your hidden accounts, the inflated budgets, the contractors that don't exist, and he's already given a copy to federal investigators. Beatrix sucked in a breath. You don't know what you're doing. Oh, I do, I folded my hands, because you forgot something important. The people you step on eventually learn to stand. Fallon buried her face in her hands. We're finished. No, I said. You're accountable. The room spun into chaos. Phones ringing, voices rising, board members arguing in overlapping shouts. Beatrix and Martin were already strategizing in frantic whispers. Fallon was sobbing quietly. And through the glass walls, the newsroom screens continued flashing updates. I stepped out of the conference room and walked toward the elevators, breath steady, heart strangely calm. I had expected fear, or vindication, or anger. Instead, I felt clarity. The elevator dinged open. Grayson stood inside. His eyes were rimmed red, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept at all. When he saw me, he inhaled sharply. Nora, he said, voice barely audible. It's happening. Yes, I said. He swallowed. My father, my mother, they're losing everything. I nodded once. They built it on lies. It was always going to fall. He stepped aside so I could enter. Can I ride with you? I hesitated, then nodded. We stepped inside. The doors slid shut. He looked at me, pain carved deep in his face. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. I know, I said quietly. But this isn't about us anymore. He nodded, brushing a tear from his cheek. Tell me what to do. You choose, I said. You can stand with them. Or you can stand with the truth. The elevator stopped at the ground floor. I stepped out. He didn't follow. I didn't look back. Outside, the crowd had grown. More reporters, more former tenants, more signs calling for accountability. And somewhere among them, my mother's face appeared to me. Steady, resilient, unbreakable. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Phase 4, ready. Whenever you are. I breathed deeply, letting the cold air fill my lungs. Everything was in motion now, and there was no going back. The city felt different that night. Charged, restless, like every street lamp hummed with a secret it couldn't wait to spill. By the time I stepped back into the Urban Pulse warehouse, Daniel had every monitor lit up, multiple news streams running simultaneously. Headlines crawled across the screens faster than the eye could catch. Lorne Group, collapsing under federal scrutiny, whistleblower reveals unlawful displacements. Wedding disaster turns into corporate scandal, Urban Pulse founder. At center of expose, every angle, every narrative, every voice, the whole country suddenly cared. Daniel looked up as I walked in. "It's out," he said. "All of it. Crane didn't hold back." My pulse quickened. "How bad?" "For them?" he snorted. "Nuclear." On the largest screen, Elliot Crane appeared in a studio, hair windblown from hours outside Lorne Tower, face intense as he laid out the evidence in patient, devastating detail. The segment switched between footage of derelict lots, transcripts of internal emails, scans of contractor invoices, and interviews with former tenants. Then, suddenly, an image of my mother flashed onto the screen. I froze. She was standing in front of the old Gable Street house, years younger, holding my hand. The shot had been taken from public records, an old census archive, not the surveillance photo, thank God, but still, the sight of her face pulled at something raw inside me. Daniel muted the sound. "I'm sorry," he said. "I tried to warn them off, but Crane insisted context mattered." I swallowed hard. "It does." "But you didn't want her dragged into this." "She already is," I murmured. "And she deserves the truth to be told, not rewritten by the people who tried to break us." He hesitated, then nodded. "There's more." He clicked to another feed, this one a shaky phone recording. A crowd outside Lorne Tower, people chanting, signs lifted high. "Stop the corruption. Justice for our communities. End forced displacements." In the middle of it stood Fallon Lorne, flanked by 3 bodyguards, hair wild, makeup smudged. She was shouting at reporters, at protesters, at no one in particular. "This is a setup, a smear campaign. We're not the bad guys, she is." She pointed straight at the camera. "She destroyed our family for attention, for fame, for revenge." The crowd booed. Someone threw a cup. Security rushed her inside. Daniel rubbed his temples. "That's not going to help them." "No," I said, "it's not." My phone buzzed on the desk. A text from an unknown number. "They're going to blame you. Fight back, tonight." A.B. Aidan Blake, the whistleblower. I exhaled slowly. "We need to get ahead of their narrative." Daniel nodded. "I've been prepping talking points. But you need more than a statement. You need a counterattack." I raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" He motioned toward the back of the warehouse. "You should see this." I followed him to a small conference area where Talia was hunched over her laptop, typing with the intensity of someone building something that mattered. She looked up when we approached. "It's ready," she said. "What is?" "A public archive," she replied. "Everything Aidan gave us, everything Crane corroborated, everything we verified, all in one place, public, searchable, indisputable." Daniel added, "Once this is live, no Lorne lawyer can bury anything. The moment they try to spin, the receipts will be right there." I stared at the screen. Hundreds of documents, maps, legal filings, invoices, property records, emails, years of wrongdoing distilled into digital form. "Upload it," I said. Talia clicked a button. "Done." The screen refreshed. The Lorne files, public access. A moment later, a notification pinged. Someone was already in the archive. Fast, Talia whispered. People were waiting, Daniel said. But I wasn't looking at the files. I was staring through the warehouse windows at the night sky, the weight of what we'd done settling over me. We just started a war, I murmured. Daniel shook his head. No, they started it. You're just ending it. Before I could respond, the warehouse door banged open. All three of us jolted. A figure stepped inside, wet from the rain, breathless, clutching something in his hand. Aiden. He looked worse than before, eyes red, shirt damp, wrist brace slipping. They know, he gasped. Someone inside the board gave your name to the private firm. You need to move now. I hurried toward him. Aiden, slow down. What happened? I was followed, he said. Not by reporters, by a black SUV. Same make and model used by Sunlight Integrated Services. My stomach dropped. They're still active, after the exposé. Of course they are, he said. Martin hired them, not the company. They're loyal to him. Daniel stepped between us. Are they following Nora? I don't know, Aiden said. But if they think she has more documents... She does, Talia muttered. I threw her a look. It's fine, she said quickly. The files are already live. They can't stop it. Aiden shook his head. They don't know that yet. They still think they can contain you. The warehouse went quiet. I felt the shift. The moment the line between corporate scandal and personal danger blurred. What do they want? I asked softly. Aiden swallowed. Silence. They're not getting it. He thrust something into my hands. A flash drive sealed in a plastic evidence bag. This is the last piece. I didn't know if I should give it to Elliot or hold it, but it belongs to you. I opened the bag, inserted the drive into my laptop. A single video file appeared. What is it? Daniel asked. Let's find out. I clicked play. The footage was grainy, time-stamped 3 months earlier, filmed inside a small boardroom. Martin Lorne sat with 4 executives, leaning over a stack of papers. This is the final restructuring plan, he said. If the Lincoln audit goes south, we pivot. We blame the community platform. We blame the human interest partnership. One executive asked, Urban Pulse? Yes, Martin said. We position Velasquez as inexperienced, unstable, overwhelmed by scale. We leak personal information. We use her backstory. Anything to shift heat. Another asked, and if she pushes back? Martin smirked. Then we remind her what we know about her family. People fold when their past becomes leverage. My hands curled into fists. Talia's eyes widened. Daniel cursed softly, but Aiden wasn't finished. Keep watching, he said. The video continued. The door opened and someone entered the frame. Grayson, young, confident, clean-cut. Martin said, Grayson, good timing. We were discussing the fallback plan. Grayson shrugged. Do what you need to do. The room went still. He didn't say anything cruel. He didn't smile. He didn't react at all. He simply didn't care. 3 months ago, long before the wedding, long before the insult, long before everything. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not grief, not anger. Understanding. Aiden whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't know this part existed. I thought he was different. Daniel touched my shoulder gently. Nora. But I stepped back. I needed air, space, something that wasn't this. I walked to the far end of the warehouse, letting my breath come in slow, steady pulls. The man I thought I might marry. The man who said he loved me. The man who stood silently as his family prepared to destroy the work I'd built. He hadn't objected. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't even blinked. He chose them long before I ever chose myself. I wiped my eyes. Once, not for him. For the version of me who had believed he was different. Then I turned back to Daniel, Talia, and Aiden. Tomorrow, I said, we go to the city. We bring everything, every document, every file. Daniel nodded. We'll be ready. And after that, I continued quietly, we rebuild what they tried to erase. Aiden exhaled in relief. Talia smirked fiercely. It's about time. Outside the warehouse, sirens wailed in the distance. The city was stirring, waking, shifting under its own weight. Inside, the four of us stood together, surrounded by the truth. And for the first time since the wedding, it felt like the floor beneath me wasn't shaking. It was solid, ready, unbreakable. City Hall wasn't built for moments like this. The marble lobby echoed with too many footsteps, too many murmurs, too many reporters pressed against velvet ropes waiting for a piece of the story they'd been chasing for 48 hours. Flashbulbs popped like tiny explosions as I walked through the doorway, Daniel beside me, Aiden close behind, wrist still bandaged. Talia trailed us carrying the hard drives like they were sacred objects. We moved together, a small formation against a crowd that felt hungry. Voices shouted, "Nora, is it true the Lorne group threatened your family? Did your fiancé know about the displacement records? Are you planning to pursue criminal charges?" I didn't flinch. I didn't answer. My focus stayed fixed on the chamber doors ahead. 2 tall panels of oak carved with the city seal, guards posted on either side. Inside those doors, the oversight committee was waiting. Inside those doors, the Lorne family would be forced to sit across from the people they'd hurt for decades. Inside those doors, the truth would no longer belong only to us. The guards stepped aside. The doors opened, and the room fell silent. Every seat was filled. Residents from neighborhoods affected by Lorne projects sat shoulder to shoulder, some holding folders, others clutching photographs of homes long demolished. Lawyers lined the walls. Representatives from 2 federal agencies sat in a section cordoned off for official observers. At the far side of the room, behind a long mahogany table, sat the committee. Councilwoman Reyes in the center, flanked by 4 other members. Their faces were hard, focused, ready. Across from them sat the Lorne delegation. Martin, Beatrix, Fallon, 3 attorneys, and 1 empty seat, Grayson's. My stomach tightened, but only for a moment. Then I exhaled and let it go. We took our seats at the presenters' table. The lights shifted, microphones clicked on, cameras rolled. Councilwoman Reyes leaned toward her mic. "This session will now come to order. Ms. Velasquez, Mr. Mora, Mr. Blake, thank you for appearing voluntarily. We appreciate your cooperation in this investigation." Her gaze shifted to the Lorne table. "We also acknowledge the presence of Mr. and Mrs. Lorne, Ms. Fallon Lorne, and legal counsel." Martin stiffened like he'd been forced into a chair made of nails. Reyes continued, "We will begin with questions for Ms. Velasquez. Please present any evidence you deem relevant." Daniel opened the first binder and pushed it toward me. I flipped it open, hand steady, breath calm. "The first document," I began, "is a contractor ledger from the Lincoln Renewal Project." The monitors behind us lit up with the spreadsheet, line items glowing bright against dark rows. "Payments were issued to non-existent contractors," I continued. "Invoices inflated, signatures forged, and entire neighborhoods classified as underdeveloped despite community protests." Councilwoman Reyes nodded. "And these payments were approved by Mr. Martin Lorne," I said, "and others in senior leadership." A murmur rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed in. Fallon shifted in her seat, jaw tight. I flipped to the next binder. "This document outlines property acquisitions made under false pretenses, including 1427 Gable Street." Gasps scattered across the room. "That property," I said, voice steady, "belonged to my grandmother. My mother and I were displaced before the age of due process reforms. We were not offered relocation assistance. We were not compensated. We were pushed out." Councilwoman Reyes's eyes softened. Just a moment, but enough. Daniel pulled up a map of the neighborhood, color-coded to show every family forced out of their home. A man in the back whispered, "That was our block." Another said, "My aunt lived there." A woman began crying quietly. Councilwoman Reyes cleared her throat. "Mr. Blake, please present your testimony." Aiden stood slowly. Every eye turned to him. He adjusted the mic, voice surprisingly steady. "My name is Aiden Blake," he said. I worked in Lorne Group's compliance department for 3 years. During that time, I witnessed coordination between leadership and external contractors to obscure financial mismanagement. When I expressed concerns internally, I was told, and I quote, "Your loyalty is part of your salary package." The audience murmured again. Aiden continued, "I submitted evidence of misconduct to multiple supervisors. No one acted. Instead, I was removed from key meetings. My assignments were taken away. And one evening, after leaving work, a black SUV forced me off the road." Gasps. Someone shouted, "Jesus Christ!" Reyes leaned forward sharply. "Mr. Blake, do you believe that incident was connected to your whistleblowing?" Aiden swallowed hard. "Yes, I do." Fallon rolled her eyes, muttering something to her attorney. Beatrix sat motionless, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I opened the final binder and slid a flash drive across the table. "This contains the internal memo detailing plans to use Urban Pulse as a scapegoat." Reyes gestured. "Show it." The screen filled with the grainy footage. Martin and his executives discussing contingency plans, my name highlighted on internal slides. Then the video continued. Grayson entering the room. His silence, his shrug, his agreement. The room froze. Not a single breath seemed to move. Beatrix trembled. Fallon stared at her father, horrified. Martin clenched his jaw hard enough to crack enamel, but it was the empty seat beside them that burned the hottest. Councilwoman Reyes finally broke the silence. "Thank you, Ms. Velasquez. This material is substantial. We have additional questions for the Lorne delegation." Martin surged to his feet. "This is an ambush!" Reyes stared at him calmly. "This is accountability." Beatrix rose too. "These documents were stolen." "Leaked," I corrected. "Not stolen." Fallon pounded a fist on the table. "She's lying. All of this is about revenge because she ruined her own wedding." A reporter in the crowd shouted back, "Your mother called hers a mistaken address." Beatrix snapped, "That never happened." I lifted my phone and played the audio clip from the wedding, her voice saying the sentence exactly as it had been heard. The room erupted. Reporters stood, shouting questions. People held up phones recording every second. A council member demanded order, banging a gavel. Another called for security. Martin pointed at me. "You think you can destroy us? You're nothing but a girl with a grudge." I leaned forward, voice steady. "Then why did you assign a surveillance team to follow me? And why did you have my mother photographed at grocery stores and salons?" Fallon paled. "What?" "You followed my mother," I repeated softly, "for leverage." Councilwoman Reyes slammed the gavel. "Enough. We will convene an executive session to deliberate next steps." The guard stepped forward. The committee stood. The audience buzzed like a beehive kicked open. And then something unexpected happened. As I gathered the documents, a figure appeared at the back of the room. Grayson. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were tired, but he walked with purpose. Fallon hissed, "Where have you been?" Beatrix snapped, "Sit down right now." But he didn't. He walked to the microphone. Councilwoman Reyes turned. "Sir, this session is closed. I have a statement," he said, "and I won't leave until I give it." The room went still again. He faced the committee. "My name is Grayson Lorne. I am the heir to the Lorne Group, and everything you've heard today is true." Beatrix gasped as if she'd been shot. Fallon whispered, "No, no, no." But Grayson didn't look at them. He looked at me. "I knew about the internal scapegoat plan," he said. "I didn't understand how deeply it would hurt Nora. I didn't stop it, and that makes me complicit." My chest tightened, not with hope, with closure. He continued, "My father's actions were not accidents. They were deliberate decisions made over years. He believed displacement was an acceptable cost of progress. I believed him." His voice cracked. "I don't anymore." He stepped back. The cameras erupted. The committee members scribbled furiously. My heart remained steady. Grayson turned to me. "I'm sorry, Nora." "For all of it, even the parts I didn't understand at the time." I nodded once. The acknowledgement was enough. Councilwoman Reyes addressed the room. This session is now in recess pending further action. Security escorted the Lorne delegation out. Martin raging, Beatrix shaking, Fallon silently crying. Crowds parted as I walked toward the exit. Reporters kept shouting questions, but the only voice I heard was one, quiet, tired, familiar. Nora! My mother, standing at the back of the chamber, her eyes were full, not of fear, not of pain, but of something steadier, pride. I walked to her. She squeezed my hand, and in that moment, the chaos faded, the noise blurred, the lights softened. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't fighting alone. We stepped out into the daylight together, and the city finally knew the truth. The sky over downtown looked washed out the next morning, a pale gray that made the glass buildings appear tired instead of towering. I arrived at the Urban Pulse warehouse before sunrise, clutching a coffee I wouldn't drink and a folder I wouldn't open. The hearing hadn't even cooled, and already the world outside was reshaping itself around the fallout. Daniel was already there, pacing the length of the conference area, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw me, he held up a hand to pause the caller. "They're scrambling," he said. 3 board members from Lorne Group have resigned since midnight. 2 more are lawyering up, and we just got confirmation. Federal investigators executed a preliminary document freeze at their headquarters. I exhaled slowly. Good. That's not all. He nodded toward the wall of screens. You should see this. I walked to the monitors. Every channel, every feed, every headline screamed the same truth in different fonts. Lorne family collapses under corruption. Scandal community members speak out. We warned them for years. City announces emergency oversight plan. And then a photo of me and my mother taken when we left the hearing. Cameras caught us mid-step. My mother's hand looped gently through my arm, her expression steady, mine sharp. Daniel clicked a remote. A live segment came into view. A city reporter stood in front of the Gable Street lot, a barren patch of dirt where my childhood once lived. Behind her, neighbors had gathered, some holding signs, some just standing quietly, listening. A middle-aged man spoke into a mic. They said they were revitalizing our neighborhood, but all they did was take homes and leave wreckage. If it wasn't for that girl, Nora, none of this would have come out. A woman held up a photo of her old house. She saved us. She saved all of us. My throat tightened unexpectedly, not with pride, something heavier, something older. Daniel must have sensed it. He kept his voice gentle. You did what you said you would. I swallowed. It's not over. He nodded. No, but you bent the arc. I turned away before he could see too much. I wasn't here to be a symbol. I wasn't here to bask in praise. There was more work to do. Work that didn't end just because the news cycle decided to crown a hero. Before I could speak again, the warehouse door opened. Talia slipped inside, headphones around her neck, laptop under her arm. She looked tired, but triumphant. The archive hit 10 million views overnight, she said. Servers lagged, but we stabilized. Any interference? I asked. They tried, she replied. Someone attempted to inject corrupted files into the archive at 4 a.m., but Aiden caught it. Right on cue, Aiden came out from the back office, pale but determined. His wrist brace was gone, replaced by fresh bandages. They're desperate, he said. Desperate people make mistakes. You should be resting, I said. He shrugged. Rest is for people who aren't on watch lists. Daniel muttered, Fair. Talia pulled up a new window on the main screen. We have something else. Something you need to prepare for. She enlarged a video. It was Martin and Beatrix. Together. Standing on the steps of Lorne Tower behind a podium holding a makeshift press conference. Microphones crowded the frame, reporters pushing forward. Flashbulbs strobed around them. Beatrix spoke first, voice strained but composed. We are devastated by the attacks on our family, the lies, the betrayal, the orchestrated smear by individuals seeking to destroy a legacy built over 4 decades. Martin stepped forward. We made mistakes. But we are not criminals. We are not monsters. We have given our lives to this city. A reporter shouted, "What about the forged signatures? The ghost vendors?" Martin's face hardened. Fabrications, all of it, generated by disgruntled employees and opportunists. Another shouted, "What about your son's testimony?" A muscle in Martin's jaw twitched. Grayson is confused, overwhelmed, manipulated. Talia paused the video. They're pushing the unstable son angle. They'll weaponize him to build sympathy. A dull ache settled behind my ribs. Did he show up at the tower this morning? Aiden nodded. Security confirmed he tried to see his parents. They wouldn't let him in. The silence that followed felt heavy. Daniel cleared his throat. There's more. He clicked to another clip. This time the video was taken outside Grayson's apartment. Reporters crowded the walkway. Grayson stood in the doorway looking hollow, exhausted, wearing yesterday's suit with loose tie. A reporter asked, "Mr. Lorne, did you testify against your family under pressure?" He shook his head. No. Do you stand by your statement? Yes. Do you regret it? Pause. Long, painful, real. No, he whispered. I don't. The crowd exploded in noise. Daniel lowered the volume. They're going to try to destroy him. And you, Aiden added quietly, especially you. I looked at the screen, at the man who once stood beside me in candlelight, the man who let his family plan my downfall, the man who chose truth too late. I can't stop what comes next for him, I said. He has to face it. Aiden nodded. Talia tapped her laptop. You have 2 interviews in an hour, and the city wants to meet again this afternoon to plan a temporary management structure for the consortium. I nearly laughed. They want me involved? More than involved, she said. They're proposing you compile the transition plan. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're becoming the face of the rebuild. I don't want the face, I said, just the foundation. You're getting both, he said. I ran a hand through my hair. Before I do anything, I need to see my mother. Talia softened. She was asking for you. I grabbed my keys. Hold everything until I get back. Aiden frowned. Are you sure it's safe? No, I said. But I'm going anyway. I drove straight to my mother's apartment. The moment I pulled into the lot, I saw her. Not through a window, not on a screen, but sitting on the front steps, hands wrapped around a steaming mug, gaze lifted to the sky like she was listening for something only she could hear. When she saw me, she stood slowly. Mija. I walked to her, and she opened her arms without hesitation. I didn't realize how much I needed that hug until her warmth wrapped around me. For the first time in days, I let myself soften. Just a little. She stroked my hair. You're doing so much, too much. It had to be done. I know. She kissed my temple. But I worry. I'm okay, I whispered. Really. She cupped my cheek with her palm. You are strong. But even strong girls need rest. Sit with me. So I did. We sat on the concrete steps, the morning cool around us. She handed me her mug. Chamomile tea. The same tea she used to sip while sitting outside our old apartment during late-night summer shifts, telling me stories to help me forget the noise of the world. People are talking, she said softly. Neighbors, friends, even strangers. They're proud of you. I swallowed hard. I didn't do it for them. I know, she said, but sometimes the right thing echoes far beyond your intentions. We watched the street for a while. A dog barked, a school bus rumbled by. A couple argued quietly walking past the mailbox. Normal life continued around us, unbothered by the tectonic shifts happening downtown. Are you scared? She asked. Yes, I answered honestly, but I'm not running. She squeezed my hand. Good, because I raised a girl who fights. I smiled weakly. I learned from the best. Her eyes misted. What will you do next? I looked at her, then at the horizon beyond the parking lot. Next, I said, I build something better, something real, something that won't collapse the moment power shifts. She nodded. And after that? I exhaled. After that, I see what's left standing. We sat together until my phone buzzed again. Daniel calling, telling me the city wanted me within the hour. I stood reluctantly. I have to go. I know, she straightened my jacket. Go do what you were meant to do. As I walked toward the car, I glanced back at her. My mother, my anchor, the woman they called a mistake in a dress. A woman who had become the center of a story that wasn't meant to include her. I whispered under my breath, "For you." Then I drove toward City Hall, where another room full of people waited for me. Not as a bride, not as a victim, not as an accessory, but as the woman who had finally pulled the truth into daylight. And daylight was only just beginning. City Hall felt heavier the second time I walked through its doors that day, as if the building had absorbed the shockwaves of the morning news and was now bracing for the aftershocks. The hallways buzzed with tension, staff members speaking in hushed voices, reporters darting between offices, aides clutching folders like shields. When I stepped into the planning chamber, a cluster of city officials turned toward me. Some nodded respectfully, some looked wary, and a few, mostly from departments long entangled with the Lorne Group, looked resentful. Even so, every eye followed me as I crossed the room. Councilwoman Reyes stood near a large whiteboard covered in charts and sticky notes. "Ms. Velasquez," she said, motioning me over, "we're glad you could make it." "I didn't have much choice," I said. "You have more choice than you think." She paused. "Especially now." The mayor's deputy entered with a stack of binders. "We're initiating a temporary governance structure for Lorne Urban Consortium. The goal is to stabilize projects and prevent further harm to communities." "And you want my input," I said. "More than input," Reyes corrected. "We want your leadership." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "We want you to serve as interim oversight liaison," the deputy said. "Not as an executive and not as a Lorne employee, but as the neutral party with the most insight and the most credibility." I stared at them. "I'm not a politician." "You're not," Reyes agreed. "You're something better right now, someone the public trusts." That word, trust, landed somewhere between my ribs. I thought of the woman holding her aunt's photo outside Gable Street, the man who testified about losing his store, the families who'd been waiting years for someone to listen. I exhaled. "What does the liaison role involve?" "You'll review active contracts," the deputy explained, "oversee audits, approve or deny redevelopment proposals, and guide the rollback of illegal acquisitions." "Including the ones tied to displacement?" "Yes." Meaning, I would have authority over the very system that once pushed my family out. A part of me wanted to turn around and walk away, to build something new with Urban Pulse, and leave the ruins of Lorne's empire to the city. But another part, the part shaped by years of silence, years of watching my mother shrink in rooms where she deserved space, that part refused to walk away. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll do it." Reyes nodded once, firm, approving. "Good, then we begin immediately." For the next 3 hours, we worked through binders of contracts, spreadsheets of expenditures, and maps of project sites. Daniel joined via video, and Aiden arrived halfway through with a flash drive full of audits he'd been completing since dawn. Talia texted updates from the warehouse, her messages a steady stream of logistical support, server reports, and the occasional morale boost. But it was when Reyes opened a set of files marked Priority that the room shifted. "These," she said, sliding the documents toward me, "are the redevelopment proposals pending since last quarter." I recognized one instantly, District 9, Riverside Affordable Housing Project. I'd spoken at a community meeting about it 2 months earlier. Residents wanted upgrades, but not demolition. They wanted rehabilitation, not displacement. But the Lorne Group had planned to raise the structure and replace it with mixed-use luxury units. I flipped through the proposal. This needs to be halted. Reyes nodded. Agreed, we'll mark it. The next file, North End Corridor Revitalization Plan, Phase 3. Another project where dozens of families were at risk of losing homes. I paused at a handwritten note tucked inside the folder. My stomach twisted when I saw the initials, G.L. Grayson Lorne. The note wasn't incriminating. It was a simple reminder about zoning variances. But seeing his handwriting felt like pressing on a bruise I'd been pretending wasn't sore. I closed the file gently. Reyes studied me. Is that a problem? No, I said. Not anymore. My voice didn't shake. We continued. By the time the clock reached 4:30, I had reviewed 26 project files and flagged 19 for immediate suspension. It was exhausting. It was overwhelming. It was necessary. Just as we wrapped the last binder, the door opened. Grayson stood there. He looked worse than that morning. Eyes reddened, posture sagging, suit jacket wrinkled as if he'd been twisting it in his hands. The room fell silent. Reyes frowned. This is a closed session. You can't be... It's okay, I said quietly. Let him in. Reyes studied me a moment, then nodded and stepped aside. Grayson entered slowly, like someone approaching a stranger's grave. He stopped a few feet in front of me, hands trembling slightly. Nora, he said, voice cracking, I didn't know where else to go. Daniel tensed on the video feed. Aiden's jaw tightened. Even the deputy's expression turned guarded. I kept my face neutral. What do you need? He swallowed. Everything is falling apart. My father, he's blaming you. My mother won't speak to me. Fallon says I ruined her life. And the press... He shook his head. They won't leave me alone. None of this surprised me. But the part that mattered, the part I listened for, was the tone beneath his words. And I heard it. Fragility, regret. But not deception. He wasn't here to manipulate me. He was here because he had run out of lies to hide behind. I'm not here to defend myself, he said. I did what I did, and I'll keep doing it. I came because I need to say the rest. I watched him carefully. Go on. He exhaled shakily. I was raised to believe we were building a better city. That displacement was temporary pain for long-term good. That financial maneuvers were routine, normal. His voice lowered. I never asked who paid the price. A muscle in my jaw strained. He continued, eyes on the floor. My father taught me silence was strategy. That hesitation was weakness. That loyalty meant obedience. And I obeyed. He looked up, eyes meeting mine. Until yesterday. The room held its breath. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I don't deserve it. But I am asking for a chance to help repair the damage. Not for me. For the people my family hurt. My heart didn't soften, but something inside it shifted. Just enough to hear him. Before I could answer, Councilwoman Reyes cleared her throat. Mr. Lorne, she said, professional but not cold, if you wish to cooperate with the investigation, we can arrange a formal deposition. He nodded. I'll answer anything. She gestured for an aide to escort him to a separate room. Grayson hesitated, then looked at me one more time. I meant what I said, Nora, all of it. I nodded once. Not acceptance, not rejection, acknowledgement. He left. The door shut softly behind him. Reyes turned to me. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said. And I was, because the truth was heavier than heartbreak, and I had no room left for broken promises. We finished the remaining documents and stepped out into the fading daylight. The air felt cooler, gentler. People were still gathered outside, some holding signs, others holding hope. As I walked down the steps, a woman approached me, mid-50s, silver hair pulled into a bun, eyes sharp. You don't know me, she said, but I lived in North End for 30 years. The Lorne Group tried to buy my home in 2018. We fought them. You exposed them. Her voice trembled. "Thank you." I swallowed hard. "I didn't do it alone." "No," she said softly. "But you made it possible." Behind me, I heard footsteps. My mother stepped out from the building. Daniel must have called her. She approached with that familiar mixture of concern and pride. "You did good today," she murmured. "Did I?" "Yes," she said, "because you didn't run from the fire. You walked into it with your head high." I let myself lean against her shoulder briefly. "I don't know how much more fire there'll be." "A lot," she said honestly. "But you're ready." As we reached the bottom of the steps, the crowd began to clap. Not wildly, not theatrically, but steadily, softly, with meaning. A sound not for spectacle, but for truth. And for the first time since the night of the wedding, I felt something unclench slowly inside my chest. A beginning. Not of vengeance, of restoration, of my voice. The morning the city released its final oversight decision began quietly, the kind of soft blue sunrise that made everything look washed clean. I stood on the balcony outside the Urban Pulse warehouse, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, watching the skyline I'd fought so hard to protect. The streets below were already waking, buses sighing at stops, cyclists weaving between cars, early risers walking dogs in puffy jackets. Life moved on, as it always did, unaware of how close it had come to being shaped by people who never walked these sidewalks. Inside the warehouse, voices drifted, Daniel on a call, Aiden typing furiously at a workstation, Talia editing a clip for the community archive. It felt strange, almost surreal how normal things had become again, considering the storm we'd just walked through. My phone buzzed, a message from Councilwoman Reyes. "Final vote passed. Come to City Hall at noon. Bring your mother." I stared at the text for a long moment. Then I went to get dressed. By the time we pulled up to City Hall, the steps were crowded. Not with protesters this time, but with residents, local leaders, journalists, and people whose names I didn't know but whose faces I recognized from community meetings. Murals of District 9 and North End hung on banners. Someone had painted, "This is our city," across the top of the main rail in bold blue strokes. My mother gripped my arm gently as we walked through the crowd. Her steps were careful but steady. She wore a navy dress she'd altered herself. Simple, elegant, nothing like the one that had been mocked at the wedding. And yet, somehow she glowed in the morning light. Inside the chamber, the air hummed with anticipation. Reyes greeted us with a warm nod. "It's done," she whispered. "The consortium is dissolved. The fraudulent properties will be returned or repurchased at fair value. All ghost contractors are under federal review." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "What about the new oversight body?" I asked. Reyes motioned toward the front row where a plaque covered with a cloth sat on the table. "We're unveiling it today." The mayor stepped up to the podium. Cameras clicked. The room settled. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for our city," she said. "One rooted in transparency, accountability, and community partnership." She gestured to me. "And none of this would have been possible without a young woman who refused to stay silent. Someone who stood up not only for her loved ones but for every neighborhood overlooked or pushed aside." My mother squeezed my hand. I felt my throat tighten. The mayor continued. "It is my honor to announce the formation of the Velázquez Community Integrity Council, named in recognition of the courage, advocacy, and unwavering integrity demonstrated by Nora Velázquez." My breath caught. My mother gasped softly, covering her mouth with her fingers. Tears welled in her eyes, not of pain this time, but pride. Reyes pulled the cloth from the plaque. My mother's last name, our last name, shone in gold across the polished wood. The room erupted in applause. Not polite applause, not political applause, human applause, warm, fierce, real. I stepped forward, heart pounding, and approached the microphone. "I don't have a prepared speech," I began, "but I do have something to say." The room quieted. "When you grow up in a place where no one comes to help, You learn early that if something needs changing, you do it yourself. You don't wait for permission. You don't wait for the right moment. You act. I swallowed. But change doesn't happen alone. It happens because a community refuses to disappear. I glanced at my mother. It happens because someone teaches you that your voice matters, even when powerful people try to convince you it doesn't. A ripple of emotion swept through the room. I didn't expose the Lorne group to take anything from anyone. I did it so the truth could finally breathe. So families like mine wouldn't have to choose between silence and survival. So no one would have their story stolen again. I took a slow breath. This council isn't about my name. It's about yours. Every neighborhood, every street, every voice that was ignored. This city belongs to all of us, not just the ones who can afford to shape its skyline. When I stepped back, the mayor hugged me, then Reyes, then half a dozen residents who'd come forward with quiet thank yous and tearful embraces. After the ceremony, as people trickled out into the sunlight, I stepped aside to a quiet corner of the lobby. My mother joined me, her smile gentle and knowing. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it," I corrected. She shook her head. "No, you carried the fire." I pulled her into a hug. She smelled faintly of lavender and hairspray, the scent of home and resilience all rolled into one. When we finally stepped outside, the crowd waiting on the steps cheered. A group of teenagers held up a poster board with a hand-painted quote, "Silence is not peace." Nora Velasquez. I blinked back tears. Not sadness, not relief. Something heavier and lighter all at once. A beginning. Daniel, Aiden, and Talia joined us at the bottom of the steps. The 6 of us stood together in the bright noon sun, and for the first time since the wedding, that moment when my world cracked open and everything spilled out, I felt a sense of wholeness forming again. We started walking toward the street, the crowd parting around us like a warm tide. My mother slipped her hand into mine. "Where to now?" she asked. I smiled. "Back to the warehouse. There's work to do." And work was what grounded me. Work was what rebuilt broken places. Work was what turned truth into change. As we crossed the plaza, a reporter called out behind me, "Nora! One question, do you regret calling off the wedding?" I turned just enough to meet her eyes. "No," I said. "I regret staying quiet for as long as I did." The crowd erupted again, laughter mixed with applause. I didn't look back. Some stories end with fireworks. Some end with final blows or silent exits. Mine ended here, with daylight, with my mother's hand in mine, with the sound of a city finally waking up to its own reflection. But endings are only beginnings wearing different clothes, and this beginning was one I chose. If you've stayed with me this far, if this story touched you even a little, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me where you're watching from, or share your own story of standing up when no one else would. And if you want more stories like this, stories about justice, resilience, and the moments that change everything, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Your support means more than you know.